Grace Anderson could still feel the phantom weight of his hands on her body, even though it had been 2 years since she had last seen him. And the panic attacks came without warning in grocery stores, on busy streets, anywhere a stranger moved too close or spoke too harshly. She stood in the marble lobby of Davidson Industries, clutching her portfolio against her chest like armor. The receptionist had directed her to the 42nd floor for her interview, and Grace wondered if she could make it through without her hands shaking visibly. She had applied for the interior design position on a whim, never expecting a callback. The pay was extraordinary, the kind of money that could finally let her afford a therapist who specialized in trauma, maybe even move out of the apartment she shared with 2 roommates who meant well, but did not understand why she flinched at sudden noises. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, revealing floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. Grace stepped out onto plush carpet, her worn flats silent against the expensive material. A woman in a sleek black dress greeted her with a warm smile. "Grace Anderson, I'm Patricia. Mr. Davidson is ready for you." Grace's stomach tightened. She had researched the company but found surprisingly little about its founder. Zachary Davidson was notoriously private, with only a handful of professional photos available online. He had built Davidson Industries from the ground up, starting with commercial real estate before expanding into luxury residential properties. At 32, he was worth an estimated $400 million. Patricia led her down a hallway lined with abstract art, stopping at a set of double doors. She knocked once before opening them. "Miss Anderson for you, Mr. Davidson." The office was enormous, decorated in warm woods and deep greens that somehow made the space feel intimate despite its size. Behind a massive desk sat a man who looked nothing like Grace had imagined. Zachary Davidson had dark hair that fell slightly over his forehead, sharp features that suggested he rarely smiled, and eyes so intensely focused that Grace felt pinned in place. He wore a charcoal suit without a tie, the top button of his shirt undone in a way that suggested he had little patience for formality. He stood, and Grace realized he was tall, easily over 6 feet. His presence filled the room. "Miss Anderson." His voice was deep, measured. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please sit." Grace forced her legs to move, settling into the leather chair. She placed her portfolio on her lap, aware that her knuckles were white from gripping it too hard. Zachary returned to his seat, studying her with an expression she could not read. The silence stretched for several heartbeats too long. Grace's therapist had taught her breathing exercises for moments like this, but her mind went blank. "You have an impressive background," he finally said, opening a folder that Grace recognized as her resume. "Top of your class at Parsons, internships with some of the best firms in New York, yet you have been working at a small boutique design shop in Brooklyn for the past year. Why?" Grace had prepared an answer for this question, something diplomatic about wanting to work closely with clients and appreciate the personal touch of a smaller company. But as she opened her mouth, the rehearsed words died in her throat. Zachary Davidson was watching her with an intensity that made her feel transparent, as though he would see through any polished lie. "I needed somewhere quiet," she heard herself say. The truth came out softer than she intended. Smaller, less overwhelming. His expression shifted slightly, something that might have been understanding flickering across his features. He did not press for details. "This position would not be quiet," he said. "I am renovating 3 properties simultaneously. A penthouse in Tribeca, a brownstone in the West Village, and a private residence in Connecticut. The timeline is aggressive, the budget is substantial, and I will be directly involved in every decision. I do not hand off projects and disappear. If you work for me, you will see me daily." The warning in his tone was clear. Grace should have felt intimidated. Instead, something about his directness steadied her. He was not trying to charm her or put on a show. He was simply stating facts. "I can handle that," she said, and was surprised to find she meant it. "Can you?" He leaned back in his chair, still studying her. "You are shaking." Grace looked down at her hands, mortified to see he was right. She had been so focused on maintaining eye contact, on not letting her voice waver, that she had not noticed the tremor in her fingers. "I apologize," she managed. "I am not usually this nervous in interviews." "That is not nervousness," Zachary said, and there was no judgment in his observation, only statement of fact. "That is fear. What are you afraid of, Miss Anderson?" The question was so unexpected, so impossibly direct, that Grace felt her carefully constructed composure crack. She looked up at him, ready to make some excuse and leave with whatever dignity she could salvage. But his expression stopped her. He was not mocking or curious in a cruel way. He genuinely seemed to want to know. "Everything," she admitted quietly. "Most days I am afraid of everything." The silence that followed felt different from before. Zachary set down her resume and folded his hands on his desk. "Show me your portfolio." Grace blinked at the shift in conversation. She opened the leather case with fumbling fingers, pulling out photographs of her work. The boutique firm in Brooklyn had given her creative freedom on residential projects, and she had poured herself into each one. Warm living spaces that felt like sanctuaries. Bedrooms designed to be peaceful retreats. Kitchens that invited gathering and comfort. Zachary took his time looking through each page. Grace watched his face for some reaction, but he remained unreadable until he reached a photo of a reading nook she had designed for a client recovering from surgery. Built-in shelves, a window seat with soft cushions, lighting that could be adjusted for any mood. "This," he said, tapping the photo. "Tell me about this." The client needed a space where she could escape, Grace explained. "Somewhere she felt completely safe while she healed. I wanted to create something that felt like being held without being confined." Zachary looked up at her, and for the first time something almost like warmth entered his eyes. "You are hired." Grace stared at him. "What? You are hired," he repeated, closing the portfolio. "You can start Monday. Patricia will handle the paperwork and discuss salary, which I assume you will find more than fair. The Tribeca penthouse is the priority. I want your initial concepts by the end of next week." "Mr. Davidson, I do not understand." "You barely looked at my work, and the interview was hardly traditional." "I am not interested in traditional," he said, standing to signal the meeting was over. "I am interested in someone who understands that spaces can heal or harm. That design is not just about aesthetics, but about how people feel when they are alone with themselves. Your work shows that, and your honesty just now showed me you will not waste my time pretending to be someone you are not." He extended his hand. Grace rose on unsteady legs and shook it. His grip was firm and warm, and he released her hand quickly, as though aware she might not want prolonged contact. "Monday, 9 in the morning, do not be late." Grace found herself in the hallway with her portfolio, Patricia smiling and gesturing for her to follow. The next hour passed in a blur of paperwork and details. The salary was staggering, more than double what she currently made. Health insurance started immediately, with mental health coverage that included therapy and counseling. When Grace finally left the building, stepping out into the afternoon sunlight, she felt dizzy with disbelief. She pulled out her phone and called the one person who had stood by her through everything. "Lily, I got it. I got the job." Her best friend's squeal of delight made her smile for the first time in days. That weekend, Grace allowed herself to feel something dangerously close to hope. She researched the properties she would be working on, made preliminary sketches, and tried not to overthink her new employer. Zachary Davidson was an enigma, but he had not pressed when she showed vulnerability, had not made her feel weak for admitting her fear. That mattered more than she wanted to examine too closely. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Grace dressed in black pants and a cream blouse, pulling her dark blonde hair into a low ponytail. Professional but not trying too hard. She arrived at Davidson Industries at 8:45, and Patricia greeted her like an old friend. "Mr. Davidson is already at the Tribeca site," she said, handing Grace a sleek black tablet. "Address is loaded. He is expecting you." The penthouse was in a newly constructed building overlooking the Hudson River. Grace signed in with the doorman and took the elevator to the top floor. The space was completely gutted, just concrete floors and exposed beams, but the bones were beautiful. Massive windows flooded the open layout with natural light. Zachary stood near the windows, talking on his phone. He wore dark jeans and a black Henley, looking more like a contractor than a millionaire developer. He ended the call when he saw her. "You are early. Good." He pocketed his phone and gestured around the space. 3,500 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms. The buyer wants modern but not cold, functional but luxurious. She is a surgeon, works brutal hours, needs a space that lets her decompress the moment she walks in. Grace set down her bag and pulled out a measuring tape, already envisioning possibilities. Does she entertain? Rarely. She values privacy. She is also recently divorced and wants nothing that reminds her of her previous home. Grace nodded, making notes on the tablet. Starting over. Exactly. They spent the next 3 hours walking through the space. Zachary had opinions about everything but listened when Grace pushed back on his ideas. He wanted darker colors in the master bedroom. She suggested soft grays and warm whites instead, explaining that a surgeon needed a space that felt clean and calm, not heavy. To her surprise, he conceded the point. Around noon, he ordered food from a nearby deli. They sat on overturned buckets, eating sandwiches surrounded by construction dust, and Grace realized she was not afraid. Zachary kept a careful distance, never moving too close or making sudden gestures. She wondered if he was conscious of her boundaries or if it was simply his nature. "You live in Brooklyn?" he asked, unwrapping his sandwich. "Williamsburg. I share an apartment with 2 roommates." "That will change with your new salary." Grace smiled slightly. "Maybe I like my roommates, but you do not like having roommates." She glanced at him, surprised by his perception. "No, but my own place in the city is expensive. Brooklyn has good options." "Brooklyn has better options when you are not trying to afford therapy twice a week." The words slipped out before Grace could stop them. She tensed, waiting for the inevitable questions or worse, the well-meaning advice from someone who could not possibly understand. Zachary took a bite of his sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. "Good therapists are worth their weight in gold. Terrible ones are worse than nothing." "I hope you have one of the good ones." "I do," Grace said quietly, relief washing through her that he was not going to push for details. "She has helped me more than I can explain." He nodded and changed the subject to backsplash tile options. Grace felt a surge of gratitude so intense it almost hurt. The days fell into a pattern. Grace arrived early, left late, and poured everything into the 3 projects. Zachary was demanding but never cruel, expecting excellence but acknowledging when she delivered it. He had an eye for detail that rivaled her own, catching things most clients would never notice. It should have been exhausting, working for someone so exacting. Instead, Grace found herself thriving. The panic attacks did not stop. 2 weeks into the job, She had won in the middle of a meeting with contractors at the Connecticut property. She excused herself, locked herself in a bathroom, and focused on breathing until the crushing weight on her chest eased. When she emerged 20 minutes later, pale and shaking, she expected to find Zachary irritated at the delay. Instead, he was sitting on the front steps of the house, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when she approached. "The contractors left. I told them we would reschedule." He stood, sliding his phone into his pocket. "There is a coffee shop a mile down the road. You look like you could use something warm." Grace wanted to apologize, to explain, but the words stuck in her throat. Zachary walked to his car, a black Range Rover that suited him perfectly, and held the passenger door open. The coffee shop was small and nearly empty. Zachary ordered for both of them without asking what she wanted, returning with 2 lattes and a slice of apple pie with 2 forks. "Sugar helps," he said simply, pushing the pie toward her. They sat in silence for several minutes. Grace sipped her latte and felt her heartbeat slowly return to normal. Zachary checked his emails and did not stare at her or ask if she was okay. "I have PTSD," she finally said, the words feeling heavy and important. "From a relationship that ended badly. Sometimes I can manage it and sometimes it manages me." Zachary set down his phone, giving her his full attention. "What does managing it look like for you?" "Therapy. Medication sometimes, though I do not like how it makes me feel. Avoiding triggers when I can, which is not always possible. Working on buildings helps. Creating spaces I can control when I feel like I have no control over anything else." "Is that why you became a designer?" Grace considered the question. "Partially. I have always loved design, even as a kid. But after everything happened, it became necessary. I needed to believe I could make something beautiful and safe." Zachary nodded slowly. "I bought my first property when I was 23. A condemned warehouse in Queens that everyone said was worthless. I spent 2 years renovating it myself, learning construction from YouTube videos and old men at the hardware store who took pity on me. It was not profitable. I barely broke even after selling it. But I needed to prove I could take something broken and make it whole." Grace looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something in his expression she recognized. Pain that had been carefully locked away but never truly healed. "What were you trying to fix?" she asked softly. "Myself," he said. "I grew up in foster care, bounced around until I aged out of the system at 18. I had no family, no safety net, and no reason to believe I would amount to anything. Building something from nothing was the only way I knew how to prove I was worth something." The confession hung in the air between them. Grace felt the careful distance Zachary maintained shift into something else, something that felt like understanding. "Did it work?" she asked. "Eventually. Though I am still figuring out what comes after you prove yourself." They finished their coffee and pie. Zachary drove her back to the Connecticut property so she could get her car, and they did not speak about what had been shared. But something had changed. Some invisible wall had been lowered. Over the following weeks, Grace noticed small things. Zachary never scheduled early morning meetings, somehow knowing that mornings were hardest for her. He texted before showing up at sites, giving her warning so she was never startled by his arrival. When they worked late, he made sure she got to her car safely, waiting until she drove away before leaving himself. The Tribeca penthouse came together beautifully. The surgeon client visited for a walk-through and cried when she saw the master suite, saying it was exactly what she needed. Zachary stood back and let Grace accept the praise, but later, when they were alone, he told her it was the best work he had seen from any designer he had hired. "You have a gift," he said. They were standing in the empty living room, the city lights glittering through the windows. You see people, not just spaces. Grace felt warmth spread through her chest. That means a lot coming from you. Why, I am just your boss. You are more than that, she said before she could second-guess the words. You have been kind to me when you did not have to be. Patient when most people would not be. That is not nothing. Zachary turned to face her fully, and in the dim light, she could see the intensity in his eyes that had intimidated her during their first meeting. Now it made her feel seen in a way that was both terrifying and thrilling. Grace, I need to be honest with you about something. Her heart began to race, but not from panic, from anticipation. From the moment you walked into my office, I knew you were different, he continued. I have interviewed hundreds of people over the years, and I can usually rate them in minutes. But you were a puzzle, terrified but brave enough to show up anyway, honest when everyone else would have lied. And your work, the way you design with your whole heart, it made me want to know you beyond the professional. Grace's breath caught. Zachary, I am not telling you this to pressure you, he said quickly. I am your employer and I would never abuse that. If you want to keep things strictly professional, I will respect that completely. But I need you to know that working with you these past 2 months has been the best part of my days. You make me laugh. You challenge my ideas. You make me want to be someone worthy of your trust. The vulnerability in his voice undid something inside Grace. She had spent 2 years building walls, protecting herself from ever being hurt again. But standing here with Zachary, she realized that safety and healing were not the same as hiding. I am scared, she admitted. I am so scared of getting close to someone again, of trusting and being wrong. I know, Zachary said gently. And I am not asking you to trust me immediately or to jump into something you are not ready for. I am just asking if I can take you to dinner. As people, not as boss and employee. Just to see if this connection I feel is real. Grace thought about all the therapy sessions, all the work she had done to reclaim her life. Her therapist had told her that healing was not about eliminating fear, but about choosing courage despite it. She looked at Zachary, at this man who had shown her nothing but respect and patience, and made a choice. Okay, she said. Yes, I would like that. His smile transformed his face, making him look younger and impossibly handsome. Saturday night. I know a place that is quiet, and the tables are spaced far apart. She smiled back, touched that he had already thought about what would make her comfortable. Saturday night sounds perfect. They left the penthouse together, and when Zachary walked her to her car, he kept his hands in his pockets, respecting her space even though she could see he wanted to reach for her. Grace appreciated it more than she could say. Saturday arrived with Grace standing in front of her closet in a mild panic. Lily was sprawled on her bed, offering commentary on every outfit Grace considered. The blue dress, Lily said decisively. It makes you look gorgeous, but it is not trying too hard. Grace held up the dress, a soft navy wrap style that fell to her knees. You do not think it is too much? It is a first date with your millionaire boss who is clearly crazy about you. There is no such thing as too much. Grace pulled on the dress, then studied her reflection. She looked pretty, which felt strange after so long feeling invisible. She left her hair down in loose waves and kept her makeup simple. Zachary picked her up at 7 in his Range Rover, and when she opened the door, his expression made her glad she had worn the dress. He looked stunned in the best way. You look beautiful, he said, his voice slightly rough. Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself. He wore charcoal slacks and a white button-down with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, casual elegance that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The restaurant was in the West Village, intimate and softly lit. Zachary had reserved a corner table that offered privacy without feeling isolated. He held her chair, a gesture that might have seemed old-fashioned from anyone else, but felt natural from him. They ordered wine and appetizers, falling into easy conversation about everything except work. Zachary told her about learning to cook from a woman named Mrs. Chen, who had run the kitchen at one of his group homes. Grace shared stories about growing up in Vermont with parents who ran a bed and breakfast, how she had spent her childhood rearranging furniture and painting her bedroom different colors every summer. "They must be proud of you," Zachary said. Grace's smile faded slightly. "They are. Though they worry. They wanted me to move home after everything happened, but I needed to stay in New York. I needed to prove I could survive here." "Everything that happened," Zachary repeated carefully. "You do not have to tell me details if you are not ready. But I want you to know I will listen if you ever want to talk about it." Grace took a sip of wine, gathering courage. "His name was Marcus. We dated for almost 2 years. At first he was charming and attentive, everything I thought I wanted. But slowly he became controlling. He did not like my friends or my job. He wanted to know where I was every moment. And when I tried to pull away, he became aggressive, physically and emotionally." She watched Zachary's expression darken, his jaw tightening. "I finally left him after he put me in the hospital with cracked ribs and a concussion. I got a restraining order, pressed charges, and he served 18 months. He has been out for 6 months now, living somewhere in Jersey according to the last update I got from the police." "Grace, I am so sorry." Zachary's voice was tight with controlled anger. "No one should ever hurt you like that. I know that now. It took a long time to believe it was not my fault, that I did not somehow deserve it. Therapy helped. Time helped. But I am still dealing with the aftermath. The panic attacks, the hypervigilance, the trust issues." Zachary reached across the table, his hand palm up in invitation. Grace stared at it for a moment before placing her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and steady. "Thank you for trusting me with this," he said. "I promise you I will never give you reason to fear me, and I will do everything in my power to make sure you feel safe." Tears pricked Grace's eyes. "Why are you so patient with me? Most men would not want to deal with all my baggage." "Most men are fools," Zachary said firmly. "Grace, you are not damaged or broken. You are someone who survived something terrible and is brave enough to keep living and trying. That is not baggage. That is strength." The rest of dinner passed in a warm haze. They shared entrees and dessert, talking about dreams and fears and everything in between. Zachary told her about his plans to start a foundation that helped foster youth transition to independence. Grace shared her secret wish to eventually start her own design firm that specialized in creating homes for survivors of domestic violence. "I want to make spaces where people feel safe enough to heal," she said, "where everything is designed to give them control and peace." "You will do it," Zachary said with such certainty that she almost believed him. "And when you are ready, I will help however I can." He drove her home, walking her to her building's entrance. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of winter. "I had a wonderful time," Grace said, suddenly shy. "So did I." Zachary smiled, the expression soft in the streetlight. "Can I see you again, not for work, just like this?" "Yes, I would really like that." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned and impossibly romantic, making Grace's heart flutter. "Good night, Grace." "Good night, Zachary." She watched him drive away before heading inside, feeling lighter than she had in years. Their relationship developed slowly, carefully. Zachary took her to museums on Sunday afternoons, to quiet bookstores in Brooklyn, to a cooking class where they laughed over burnt chicken and under-seasoned risotto. He never pushed for more than she was ready to give, content to hold her hand and steal brief kisses that left her wanting more. At work, they maintained professionalism, though Grace caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that made her pulse race. The West Village brownstone project was in full swing, and they spent long hours choosing fixtures and debating paint colors. The owner wanted something classic but not stuffy, elegant but comfortable. 3 months into their relationship, Grace had a nightmare. She woke up gasping, Marcus's face still vivid in her mind, his hands around her throat. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands and called Zachary without thinking. He answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the 3 in the morning hour. "Grace, what is wrong? I am sorry, I should not have called. I just needed to hear your voice." "Nightmare?" he asked gently. "Yes, a bad one. Tell me where you are, what you see." Grace looked around her bedroom, focusing on the details. "I am in my room. The walls are pale yellow. I have string lights above my bed. There is a stack of design magazines on my nightstand." "Good. What do you hear? Traffic outside?" "My roommate's snoring in the next room. Your voice." "I am here," Zachary said. "You are safe. He cannot hurt you anymore." They stayed on the phone for an hour. Zachary told her about the property he was closing on next week, about the terrible coffee his assistant had bought that morning, about anything and everything until Grace's breathing evened out and the panic receded. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not know what I would do without you." "You would survive," Zachary said. "You are the strongest person I know, but I am glad you called me. I am glad I get to be here for you." After that night, Grace felt something shift inside her. Zachary had seen her at her most vulnerable and had not run. He had been exactly what she needed without making her feel weak for needing it. The brownstone project wrapped up in early December, right before the holidays. The owner threw a party to celebrate, inviting the entire team. Grace wore a green velvet dress that Lily insisted made her look like a Christmas angel, and when Zachary saw her, he could not take his eyes off her. They stayed late after the other guests left, wandering through the rooms Grace had designed. The place glowed with warm lamplight and holiday decorations, feeling exactly like a home should. "You did something magical here," Zachary said, running his hand along the restored staircase banister. "This is not just a beautiful house. It is a place people will build a life." "That is always the goal," Grace said, pleased by his praise. "Spaces should enhance life, not just contain it." They ended up in the library, a cozy room with built-in shelves and a fireplace. Zachary started a fire while Grace examined the book collection the owner had already begun installing. When she turned around, Zachary was watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. "Come here," he said softly. Grace crossed to where he stood by the fireplace. The flames cast dancing shadows across his face, making him look almost dangerous except for the gentleness in his eyes. "I am falling in love with you," he said, the words simple and devastating. "I have been falling for months, maybe since the moment you walked into my office. I know we agreed to take things slow and I do not want to pressure you, but I need you to know how I feel." Grace's eyes filled with tears, but they were not from sadness. "I am falling in love with you too. I have been so scared to admit it, even to myself. But Zachary, you make me feel safe and seen and valued. You make me believe I can have something good again." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs gently brushing away the tears that had started to fall. "You deserve everything good. I want to give you everything." When he kissed her, it was different from the brief, careful kisses they had shared before. This was deeper, more certain, full of promise. Grace melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt. The world narrowed to just the two of them, the warmth of the fire and the feeling of being exactly where she belonged. They pulled apart slowly, both breathing hard. Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me tonight," he said. "Not for anything more than being close. I just want to fall asleep with you in my arms." Grace nodded, beyond words. They locked up the brownstone and drove to Zachary's penthouse in Midtown, a space Grace had never seen before. It was stunning, all clean lines and massive windows, but it felt strangely impersonal. "I know," Zachary said, noticing her expression. "It does not feel like home. I have been thinking about hiring a designer to fix that." Grace laughed. "I might know someone." He lent her a shirt to sleep in, and they climbed into his king-sized bed. Zachary pulled her close, her back against his chest, his arm secure around her waist. "Is this okay?" he murmured against her hair. "It is perfect," Grace whispered, and meant it with her whole heart. She slept better than she had in years. Christmas came with Grace splitting time between Vermont to see her parents and New York to be with Zachary. Her parents loved him immediately, charmed by his politeness and the way he looked at their daughter. Her father pulled her aside on Christmas Eve while they were doing dishes. "He is a good man," he said. "I can see how much he cares about you." "I care about him too," Grace admitted. "It terrifies me sometimes how much I care." "That is love," her father said wisely. "It is always a little terrifying. But that man would move mountains for you. Do not let fear keep you from being happy." Grace hugged her father tight, grateful for his blessing even though she had not realized she needed it. The new year brought new projects and new possibilities. Zachary asked Grace to redesign his penthouse, giving her complete creative freedom. She threw herself into it, determined to create a space that reflected who he truly was, not just the successful businessman he showed the world. She incorporated warm woods and deep blues, created a library corner filled with architectural books and design magazines, and turned the second bedroom into a workshop where Zachary could work on furniture projects he had mentioned enjoying. Personal touches everywhere that made the space feel lived in and loved. When she showed him the finished product in late February, Zachary walked through the rooms in silence. Grace followed nervously, second-guessing every choice. He stopped in the master bedroom, taking in the California king bed she had dressed in charcoal linens, the reading nook by the window, the framed photos she had found in a box in his closet and hung on the walls. Pictures of him with Mrs. Chen and other people who had clearly mattered to him over the years. "Grace," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "this is incredible. You hate it." He turned to face her, and she was stunned to see tears in his eyes. "I have never had a home before, not a real one. I have had places I lived, but never anywhere that felt like it was truly mine, where I belonged. You gave me that." Grace crossed to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "You deserve a home. You deserve to be surrounded by things that make you happy." Zachary held her tight, his face buried in her hair. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for you to realize you could do better." "There is no better," Grace said firmly, pulling back to look at him. "You are everything I did not know I was looking for. Please believe that." He kissed her then, deep and desperate and full of love. They made their way to the bed, taking their time learning each other. Zachary was gentle and attentive, constantly checking that she was okay, that she wanted this. Grace had worried that intimacy would trigger memories of Marcus, but with Zachary, everything felt new and right. He made her feel cherished and desired and safe all at once. Afterward, they lay tangled together, the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling. "Move in with me," Zachary said suddenly. Grace propped herself up on her elbow to look at him. "What? Move in with me? I know it is fast, but I want to wake up with you every morning. I want to come home to you every night. This place finally feels like home, and it is because you made it that way. Be here with me." Grace's heart raced, but not from fear, from excitement and joy and the terrifying thrill of taking a leap of faith. "Yes," she said, watching his face light up with happiness. Yes, I will move in with you. The transition was surprisingly easy. Grace's roommates were happy for her, if a little envious. Lily helped her pack, teasing her about landing a millionaire boyfriend while simultaneously demanding to be maid of honor when the time came. Living with Zachary was everything Grace had hoped. He was considerate and affectionate, leaving her notes when he had early meetings, always asking about her day, making dinner together when their schedules allowed. He never made her feel like she was too much or not enough. When she had bad days, he held her. When she had good days, he celebrated with her. Her therapy continued, and Grace was grateful that Zachary understood she needed that space to process things. Her therapist was pleased with her progress, noting that Grace seemed more grounded, more confident in herself and her choices. Spring arrived with the Connecticut residence finally complete. It was Zachary's personal project, a place he had bought years ago but never finished. Grace had not understood why until she saw the property, a sprawling estate with beautiful bones but decades of neglect. I bought this when I made my first million, Zachary explained as they walked the grounds. I thought having a big house would make me feel like I had made it, that I was worth something. But I could never bring myself to finish it because I realized a house this size is meant to be filled with family. And I did not have one. Grace squeezed his hand. What made you decide to finish it now? He turned to face her, the afternoon sun highlighting the silver threads starting to appear in his dark hair. Because now I can imagine a family here. I can imagine holidays and birthday parties and all the noise and chaos that comes with building a life with someone. Her breath caught. Zachary, I am not proposing, he said quickly. Not yet, though believe me, I have thought about it constantly. But I need you to know that when I look at the future, you are in every part of it. You and whatever family we decide to build together. Tears streamed down Grace's face, the good kind that came from overwhelming happiness. I see you in my future too. I want everything with you. The chaos and the quiet and all the in-between. They spent the summer finishing the Connecticut house together. Grace designed spaces meant for laughter and gathering, for hypothetical children to run through on summer days, for growing old together in comfort. Every choice was made with love and intention. In September, on the anniversary of the day they met, Zachary took Grace back to the Tribeca penthouse, where they had spent so many hours working together. The current owner had graciously allowed them to visit, and Grace walked through the rooms with fondness, remembering those early days. Zachary led her to the living room, where the windows framed the sunset in shades of orange and gold. He took both her hands in his, and Grace realized he was nervous. Grace Anderson, you walked into my life when I least expected it and changed everything. You taught me that strength comes in many forms, that healing is possible, that love is worth the risk. You made me believe in home and family and forever. He dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Grace's hands flew to her mouth, tears already falling. I want to spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you make me. I want to be your safe place, your partner, your home. Will you marry me? The ring was stunning, a simple emerald-cut diamond that caught the light beautifully. But Grace barely saw it through her tears. Yes, she sobbed. Yes, absolutely yes. Zachary stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her as the sun set behind them. The ring fit perfectly on her finger, like it had always been meant to be there. They got married the following June in Vermont, at her parents' bed and breakfast. It was a small ceremony with close friends and family. Lily was the maid of honor, crying through the entire reception. Patricia came from Davidson Industries, along with several contractors who had worked on their projects and become friends. Grace wore a simple lace gown and carried wildflowers from her mother's garden. Zachary wore a navy suit and could not stop smiling. When they exchanged vows, Grace promised to be his home and Zachary promised to be her safe harbor. There was not a dry eye in attendance. They honeymooned in Italy, spending 3 weeks eating incredible food and exploring beautiful architecture. Grace took hundreds of photos and sketched ideas for future projects. Zachary watched her with endless affection, still amazed that she was his wife. "What are you thinking?" Grace asked one evening as they sat on their hotel balcony overlooking the Amalfi Coast. "That I am the luckiest man alive," Zachary said simply. "That somehow I got everything I never knew I needed." Grace moved to sit in his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. "We are both lucky. We found each other when we needed it most." "Do you think about it?" Zachary asked quietly. "What you went through, does it still hurt?" Grace considered the question honestly. "Sometimes. I still have moments where the past sneaks up on me, but it does not control me anymore. I survived it and it led me here. I would not change that." "You are remarkable," Zachary murmured, kissing her softly. "Absolutely remarkable." They returned home to their Connecticut house, which finally felt complete with both of them in it. Grace officially started her own design firm, specializing in trauma-informed spaces. Zachary was her first investor, believing in her vision completely. The firm grew quickly, with clients seeking out Grace's unique approach to creating homes that prioritized emotional well-being alongside aesthetics. Zachary continued building Davidson Industries, but he made sure to maintain better balance. Family dinners became sacred, with his phone off and his attention fully on Grace. They talked about everything and nothing, never running out of things to say. 2 years into their marriage, Grace found out she was pregnant. She told Zachary by leaving a positive pregnancy test on his bathroom counter with a note that said, "Ready to fill this house with chaos." His shout of joy echoed through the entire house. He found her in the kitchen, scooped her up despite her laughing protests, and spun her around. "We are having a baby," he kept saying, his voice full of wonder. "Grace, we are having a baby." Their daughter was born on a snowy January morning, entering the world with a full head of dark hair and her father's intense eyes. They named her Vera, after the foster mother who had shown Zachary kindness when he was 8 years old. Grace watched Zachary hold their daughter for the first time and saw him fall completely in love. "I am going to give her everything," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "She is never going to doubt she is wanted and loved." "I know," Grace said softly, her own heart overflowing. "You are going to be an amazing father." And he was. Zachary was patient and playful, changing diapers without complaint and walking the floors during late-night feedings so Grace could rest. He built furniture for Vera's nursery with his own hands, a beautiful crib and changing table that would become family heirlooms. When Vera was 6 months old, Grace went back to work part-time, running her firm from a home office while Zachary adjusted his schedule to be home more. They figured out the balancing act together, supporting each other through the exhaustion and the joy of new parenthood. Vera's second birthday brought a surprise. Grace was pregnant again, this time with twins, 2 boys who arrived a month early but healthy and strong. They named them Leo and Nathan, and suddenly their house was filled with exactly the kind of chaos Zachary had once imagined. Grace watched her husband transform into the father he had never had. He was present for every milestone, every scraped knee, every bedtime story. He taught them to build things with their hands, to value hard work and kindness. He showed them daily what it meant to love and respect their mother. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Zachary surprised Grace with a vacation to Vermont, just the two of them while her parents watched the kids. They stayed at her childhood home, walking the same paths she had explored as a girl. "You ever think about where we started?" Grace asked as they sat by the fire one evening. "How broken we both were when we met." Zachary pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We were not broken. We were just waiting to be found." "You found me," Grace said, emotion thick in her voice. "You saw me when I could barely see myself. Your patience and kindness saved me." "No," Zachary said firmly. "You saved yourself. You did the hard work of healing. I just had the privilege of being there while you did it." Grace turned to kiss him properly, pouring a decade of love into it. "We saved each other then, built something beautiful from our pain." "The most beautiful thing," Zachary agreed, his hand resting over her heart. "A family, a home, a forever." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Outside, snow began to fall, covering the world in quiet white. Inside, Grace felt nothing but warmth and contentment. Years continued to pass in a blur of school plays and soccer games, of family dinners and bedtime routines. Grace's firm thrived, earning national recognition for its innovative approach to therapeutic design. She gave talks at conferences and design schools, sharing her story and helping others understand the connection between space and healing. Zachary expanded Davidson Industries to include affordable housing initiatives, using his wealth to create homes for families transitioning out of difficult situations. He worked closely with Grace, incorporating her design principles to ensure the spaces promoted dignity and peace. They became known in their community as people who cared deeply about making a difference. But at home, they were just mom and dad, navigating the beautiful mess of raising 3 active children who kept them laughing and occasionally pulling their hair out. Vera grew into a thoughtful teenager with a gift for art. Leo was all energy and enthusiasm, throwing himself into every sport and activity available. Nathan was the quiet observer, content to read for hours or help his father in the workshop. On Grace's 40th birthday, Zachary organized a surprise party at the Connecticut house. Friends and family filled every room, celebrating the woman who had touched so many lives with her kindness and talent. Grace stood in the backyard as the sun set, watching her children play and feeling Zachary's arms wrap around her from behind. "Happy birthday, love," he murmured. "Are you happy?" Grace leaned back against his chest, taking in the scene before her. The home they had built together, full of laughter and light. The children who were growing too fast but filled them with pride daily. The business that let her help others find peace through design. And most of all, the man who had shown her that love could be patient and kind, that healing was possible, that forever was real. "I am more than happy," she said, turning in his arms to face him. "I am exactly where I am meant to be." Zachary kissed her softly, the kind of kiss that still made her heart race even after all these years. "So am I. Thank you for saying yes to that first date. Thank you for trusting me with your heart. Thank you for being patient enough to earn it," Grace replied. "Thank you for showing me what real love looks like." They stood together as the evening deepened into night, surrounded by the life they had created. The trauma that had once defined Grace was now just part of her story, not the whole thing. She had healed, grown, and built something beautiful from the ashes of her pain. And Zachary, the man who had once bought broken buildings to prove his worth, had learned that his greatest achievement was not the empire he had built, but the family he had made. The love he had found with a woman brave enough to let him in. Their story was not about a millionaire saving a broken woman. It was about 2 people who had survived their own battles choosing to face the future together. It was about patience becoming passion, kindness becoming love, and two wounded souls finding their way to wholeness side by side. As the stars appeared overhead, and their children's laughter echoed through the house, Grace knew with absolute certainty that she had found her forever. Not because Zachary had rescued her, but because he had stood beside her while she rescued herself. His patience had not just turned into forever. It had helped build the foundation for a love that would last a lifetime. And that, Grace thought as Zachary took her hand and led her back toward the warmth of their home, was the greatest gift of all.